Imagine, if you will, a single leaf, dried, curled, and brittle. It falls into a cup of hot water. Slowly, it begins to unfurl. The water changes color, turning a deep, warm amber. Steam rises, carrying the scent of the earth. This simple interaction, leaf and water, has shaped empires, defined cultures, and calmed minds for 5,000 years. Tonight, we are not rushing. We are simply watching the steam rise as we drift through the long, quiet history of tea. Welcome to Ekotale. Tonight, we embark on a journey that is as slow and deliberate as the steeping of a fine oolong. We will travel back to the mists of ancient China, walk the silent paths of Japanese gardens, sail across vast, lonely oceans on wooden ships, and rest in the rolling hills of India. Our goal is not to memorize dates or battles, but to understand the flow of this commodity that became a companion to solitude. From the medicinal draughts of emperors to the afternoon rituals of the British aristocracy, tea has always required one thing: patience. So, settle in. Let your breathing slow down to match the pace of history. Let us begin at the very beginning, long before maps were drawn. In the verdant forests of the East, the story of tea begins in the realm of legend, shrouded in the mists of prehistory. It is said to have started in the year 2737 BCE. The protagonist is the mythical emperor Shen Nung, a ruler known as the Divine Farmer. Shen Nung was a man of science and curiosity, often testing herbs on himself to catalog their properties. Legend tells us that one afternoon, the emperor sat beneath the shade of a wild tree to rest. His servants were boiling water for him to drink, a hygienic practice he insisted upon. As the water bubbled gently in the pot, a slight breeze rustled the branches above. A few dried leaves from the wild tea bush drifted down, dancing on the air currents before landing in the boiling water. The emperor, intrigued by the change in color and the rise in aroma, tasted the accidental infusion. He found it refreshing. He described it as a beverage that gave vigor to the body, contentment to the mind, and determination to the purpose. Thus, tea was born not by grand design, but by a falling leaf. Moving from legend to archaeological fact, we find ourselves in the Han Dynasty, roughly 2,000 years ago. Here, tea was not yet the recreational beverage we know today. It was medicine, a bitter soup. The leaves were often compressed into cakes, roasted, and then boiled with ingredients that might sound strange to our modern palates: ginger, scallion, and orange peel. It was a savory, thick broth intended to cure ailments and aid concentration. It wasn't until the Temzi dynasty, beginning in the 7th century, that tea truly became the national soul of China. It was the golden age of tea. The preparation became a ritual. The bitterness was refined. And in the year 760, a man named Lu Yu wrote the Chajing, or the Classic of Tea. Lu Yu was an orphan raised by monks, and he codified the method of tea. He wrote about the proper temperature of water, describing the boiling bubbles as fish eyes or strings of pearls. He treated tea-making as a discipline, a way to find order in a chaotic world. As the centuries drifted by, the knowledge of tea traveled east, carried in the satchels of Buddhist monks returning to Japan. In the 9th century, seeds were planted on Japanese soil, but the true flowering of Japanese tea culture arrived much later, with the introduction of powdered green tea. In Japan, tea became more than a drink. It became a path. Chado, the way of tea. It was heavily influenced by Zen Buddhism. The goal was to achieve a state of heightened awareness and profound tranquility. By the 16th century, a tea master named Senno Riki crystallized the Japanese tea ceremony. Riki taught that the tea room was a sanctuary, separate from the outside world, The entrance to the tea room was a small, low door, requiring even the most powerful samurai to bow low and leave their swords outside. Inside, all were equal. Riki established 4 principles: harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. Harmony between the guests and the host, and between the utensils and the season. Respect for every object and every person. Purity of the heart and the environment. And finally, tranquility, the peace that comes from simply being present. Imagine the sound of the ceremony, the soft shuffle of a kimono on tatami mats, the specific sound of water being ladled from a cast iron kettle, the whisking of the bamboo. It is a slow, choreographed dance where every movement is efficient and beautiful. There is no rush. To rush would be to miss the point entirely. While monks meditated in Japan, tea was also moving west. It traveled along the dust-choked trails of the Silk Road. Camel caravans, laden with silks and spices, carried compressed bricks of tea into Central Asia and the Middle East. These bricks were so valuable, they were often used as currency. You could buy a horse with tea. But the global explosion of tea required ships. In the 16th and 17th centuries, Portuguese and Dutch merchants arrived at the ports of Canton. They brought back chests of these dried leaves to Europe. At first, it was an exotic curiosity for the wealthy, a strange oriental medicine. It took a Portuguese princess to make tea fashionable in England. When Catherine of Braganza married King Charles II in 1662, she brought with her a casket of tea. She drank it daily. The British aristocracy, ever eager to emulate royalty, began to sip tea from porcelain cups. Soon, the British East India Company began to dominate this trade. The demand in Britain became insatiable. By the 18th century, tea had replaced ale and gin as the drink of the working class. But there was a problem. China, the sole supplier of tea, had no interest in British wool or goods. They only wanted silver. This trade imbalanced silver, flowing out of Britain, and tea flowing in led to a dark chapter in history. To stop the drain of silver, the British began smuggling opium into China. This led to the Opium Wars of the mid-19th century, a conflict driven by the economics of addiction and tea. These wars resulted in the opening of treaty ports and the cession of Hong Kong, forever changing the geopolitical landscape. The British realized they could not rely solely on China. They needed their own tea. In 1823, a Scotsman named Robert Bruce confirmed that tea plants were growing wild in the Assam region of India, used by the indigenous Singpho people for centuries. The British East India Company seized upon this. They also sent a botanist spy, Robert Fortune, into China. Disguised as a Chinese merchant, Fortune stole tea plants, seeds, and crucially the secrets of processing tea. He transported them to the foothills of the Himalayas. Soon, vast plantations were carved out of the Indian landscape. Assam, with its strong, multi-black tea. Darjeeling, known as the champagne of teas, with its floral notes. Later, after a fungus destroyed the coffee crop in Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, that island too was converted to tea production. By the late 19th century, the world of tea had shifted. It was no longer just a Chinese secret. It was a global commodity, grown across the British Empire, shipped in massive clippers that raced across the oceans, bringing the leaf to breakfast tables around the world. From the accidental brew of Emperor Shennong to the silent tea rooms of Kyoto, from the dusty Silk Road to the misty plantations of Assam. The history of tea is a history of connection. It is a beverage that asks us to stop, to wait for the water to boil, to wait for the leaves to steep, to wait for the liquid to cool enough to drink. As you drift off tonight, think of that single leaf unfurling in the dark, warm water, quiet, calm, at peace. If this journey helped you relax, please gently tap the like button and subscribe to Ekatali's for more history to sleep by. Good night.